Today's webinar indeed is somewhat different. It is going to be more free-flowing and much more personal as well than what we usually do. We were inspired together with Soma to speak about these spiritual experiences that we have had, and especially the ones that are related to India and Rishikesh, which was for Soma one of the most important places where his spiritual path was shooting off. He started earlier, even before ever visiting Rishikesh, but over there something very, very profound and important happened. And to me, it has had like a similar impact. These stories, they all have a meaning. They all have a potential to inspire you and to ignite more and more of the spiritual quest or a spiritual interest in all of you in our community. And that is the reason why we decided to talk about mystical Rishikesh and spiritual awakenings. I think we are ready. So Soma, I believe we can start.
Hello everyone, Somananda here. Nice to see you all. Let's explore a little bit the subject of India, mystical India, specifically the city of Rishikesh, and the connection to the spiritual development, spiritual evolution of the human being. So there's a lot to say. So in this meeting today, the idea was that we wanted to share a little bit about India, because to be honest, India is not just a country. It's true that even from a geographic point of view, it's more than a country. It's actually a subcontinent, as many of you know. It's a very, very big place. It's got a lot of people. And also, most importantly, it's got a very rich history. India is an incredible country, and it has a history which is very, very spiritual. And as many of you probably know, the system of yoga, Tantra, and many other spiritual teachings, even Buddhism, the Sankhya philosophy, and many others have originated in India. And therefore, we find that India indeed has something very special about it. And what we're trying to share a little bit today is not the teaching about India, because to be honest, there's probably a lot of experts out there that know more about India than I am. But on the other hand, what we did want to share is our personal experience, because we've been there. For myself, I've been more than all the other teachers combined. I've been in India for now about 24 years on and off. The thing about India that we do want to share, at least from our point of view, is the fact that India has something very spiritual for the spiritual seeker. If anybody is very interested in developing themselves spiritually, I can definitely say, at least from my experience, India has something very special to offer. And I'd like to share a little bit about that. But first, a few words about my history. As many of you probably know, I started my career back in 1996 as a lawyer. I was finishing law school and working as a lawyer for a couple of years. At the same time, I was also doing yoga as a personal thing in certain yoga schools I found in the environment where I was working. And as I studied the yoga teachings, especially the Hatha Yoga Pradipika as my main text at the time, and the books of Swami Shivananda, I discovered very quickly that something is very, very unique about this information. Because you see, I was very much seeking to heal people at the time. My own father was sick, and other people I wanted to help with their issues. So I was looking into what could help with healing. So I was really looking around, studying about acupuncture and shiatsu and all kinds of healing methodologies, and nothing really left a proper impact on me until, accidentally or not, depends how you look at it, auspiciously, I stumbled upon some yoga books. I started reading one or two, and pretty quickly I got my hands on the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which, just so you know, is one of the most fundamental texts of the yoga tradition. And as I was reading through these books and doing yoga from what I could, I was quite surprised and shocked, because the yoga teaching, the original yoga, I'm not talking about what you see today in many cities around the world, yoga being mostly approached as gymnastics, hot yoga, that sort of thing. That's just gymnastics. I'm talking about when you read the authentic, the original yoga texts from ancient times in India. And when I read those texts, I was quite mind blown, because I could see that the knowledge was very profound and that these texts give knowledge also a lot about healing. And that really blew my mind. So I decided after doing this for a few years that I can't, play this game of being both a lawyer and trying to do yoga. As you can see, I've decided spirituality. So at that point, it was 1999. I dropped everything behind and I decided to explore seriously the spiritual path. I went straight to India. When you look and read a little bit about India, you find that there's a lot going on in India. For tourists, you can find anything. But for me, none of that was interesting at all because I was looking for the spiritual path there. I knew that the ancient texts are saying that one of the main things you need, the number one thing you need in order to succeed spiritually, you must find a guru. You must find a spiritual teacher. Only with a spiritual teacher, you know that you can trod the path, walk the path of spirituality with success. I understood that very clearly reading those ancient texts, and I went seeking for a teacher. And when I reached Rishikesh, because I went to Rishikesh because actually when I studied about India, I realized pretty quickly that in India there are 4 cities which are considered the most holy cities, and one of them is Rishikesh. And I decided to go to Rishikesh because in the Lonely Planet, booklet, this book, Lonely Planet for Travelers, it was saying very clearly that Rishikesh is the yoga capital of the world. Where do you look for when you want to study yoga? You go to the capital, right? So I went straight to Rishikesh, to the yoga capital of the world, and it was quite a shock to me because I loved it. I expected to have issues, because it's India and there's beggars and there's dirt and there's cows, and I was not sure. I mean, what can I expect to find there? But actually when I got there, it was an incredible experience. Just to give you a little bit of a description of Rishikesh, it's an amazing city. In Rishikesh itself, it's a completely vegetarian city. You cannot enter even with car in the main area in Rishikesh, the holy part of the city. You can't even enter with a car. And when you get there, there's actually the famous Ganges River, the Ganga River. The Ganges River flows in the middle of the city and it's quite wide. The river is very wide and it's very clean at that point because it's very close to the origin in the Himalayas over there. So it's an amazingly beautiful area. And when I settled down and started looking around, I was searching for spirituality, yoga mainly, because I realized yoga is something magnificent. It's actually so powerful. I knew it already back then. Maybe it's because of my background as a lawyer that I was really doing my research. Whatever the reason may be, when I got to Rishikesh, I decided yoga is my thing and I went for it. I was really looking for it. The amazing thing is that when you start looking for yoga, even in India, it's kind of crazy to say it, but it's true, you find out that just like in the West, maybe even more than in the West, you find that in India, there's a lot of New Age yoga as well, a lot of gymnastics yoga, a lot of yoga for tourists, basically, because what to do, many of the Indian people over there who are obviously trying to also make their living and make money, they're just teaching yoga for tourists. The thing is that when you learn yoga this way, it's again very superficial, very gymnastics, and I knew that's not what I was looking for. So I kept on looking. I spent a long time there looking around and dismissing, this is not right, this is not right. I checked all kinds of yoga teachers until at some point, finally, I found authentic yoga. It took a long time, but eventually I found it. And when I did, I dived right in and I started practicing yoga immediately. I discovered pretty quickly that it was a tantric form of yoga, which is of course amazing because Tantra is not just about sexuality, as many of you already know. Tantra is actually the Shakti, the energy. It's yoga with energy, which is the authentic form of yoga, the real yoga. Yoga is supposed to use energy. So it was very powerful. And I started doing a lot of practice over there. I can't tell you how amazing those years have been. I spent maybe 4 years in India there studying. On and off, I had to go work from time to time for a few months and come back. But I spent about 4 years over there and I really had an incredible experience. Not just because of the city, not just because of the amazing authentic Indian food that was really cool to have every day, not only because of the scenery and the beauty of the Ganges and everything else, but because, and this is the main thing I wanted to convey to you today, but because when you're in Rishikesh, you are outside of the world. It's like a bubble of spirituality. Everywhere you go, there are temples. There's beautiful mantras singing in the air. There's pujas, fire ceremonies. Some of these pujas are so amazing because people actually take these palm leaves, which are dried up, with the candles inside of them and flowers, and they make prayers and they put it on the water, and those float in the nighttime, and it makes an amazing scenery when you see it like that. And basically, I know it's hard to really understand it fully until you're actually there, but the smells, the incense, the pujas, the brahmins, the yogis, the cows, the holy cows walking everywhere, the energy is very, very fascinating. And spending time every day in and out for years in that place, even without doing yoga, it changes you. The spirituality of the place is real. It's authentic. It's very profound. Everywhere you go, people say to you, Om Namah Shivaya, Namaste, and people are very, very spiritual. Of course, there's elements which are not spiritual. There's always in every place people who are more in it for the money, or maybe beggars that don't really care. They just want to get something out of it. But if you don't think about it too much, which you won't if you'll be there, because that's something you kind of disregard pretty quickly, the energy of the place is simply magical. It's so vibrating in the air. And I remember years spending there and doing a lot of yoga. When you try to do very seriously yoga, if you decide to go on a spiritual path and you're also in Rishikesh doing it, this is, I would say, an amazing combination, a killer combination, because the area, the environment is so spiritual as it is. And then you're doing a lot of your own meditation and yoga and practice. And I was there in the company of groups of people doing yoga, quite a few people, very good friends of mine, that we were all doing yoga together, meditating together, and so on. The energy was spectacular. And I can tell you, waking up, I would start, when I first started yoga over there, I would wake up 4 a.m. in the morning, starting immediately with meditation, with practice of yoga. I remember there were years that I was there. And of course, I'm talking about the year 2000, 99, 2000, 2001. In those days, there was hardly even internet in Rishikesh. So it was even better because then no Wi-Fi anywhere. And then I would go back to doing yoga, basically, and doing spiritual practice. You think it's funny, but actually it's amazing to be so disconnected from the world. It's like you're in a spiritual bubble. It's very amazing. At night, at least in those days in Rishikesh, by 9 p.m., it's all dark. There's no activities, everybody's asleep. That I remember that I'd had a place there with a bit of a balcony, quite a big balcony, that I would sometimes go out at 9 or 10 p.m., just put the blankets on the balcony and look at the stars in Rishikesh. You hear the monkeys and the tigers in the background, and it's quite an amazing, because the jungle is very close. The experience is magical, really. Meditating, practicing, doing all kinds of purifications and Kriya yoga. All the shops have tons and tons of spiritual books. I was reading all the spiritual books I could get my hands on at the time. And the evolution spiritually, I can definitely say, was super fast. I definitely say that if I would have to compare this to doing yoga in some, I don't know, some Western city, Berlin, Los Angeles, I don't know, some of these places, oh my God, it would be a very different experience. This was the best I could hope for. And indeed, those years are very much etched in my mind, in my memory, as some of the most amazing years of my life. Because indeed, the spiritual practice was tangible. It was visceral. You can sense it. You can see the changes in you. You can see the transformation. It was very powerful, very fast, thanks to the environment that I was in. Going to the Ganges every day and crossing on the bridge over there every day, visiting various spiritual masters. For example, in Rishikesh, in Tapovan, there's one of the amazing temples, actually, which is a temple of the Kriya Yoga tradition, a temple I visited many times. One of my gurus is there. His name is Guru Shankarananda Giri. He's one of the disciples in the lineage of Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar and so on. And in that temple, which you see right now, in these images. I was there many times, meditating, practicing. At some point, we even brought a group there in 2012. And inside, you can see the statues of the great yogis from Babaji to Lahiri Mahasaya, Yukteswar, Yogananda, and other great gurus. And of course, a lot of amazing energy over there. But in front of these statues, I got my first initiation in Kriya Yoga in 2005, actually. And it was quite a powerful experience meditating with the practice of Kriya Yoga. So really, Rishikesh has so much to offer. It's quite an amazing place. So yeah, this is what I wanted to share for now. But I want to bring in Liisa right now and see if we can open the floor and share a little bit from both of our experiences over there. Go ahead.
Well, for me, first time I counted spiritual studies altogether was 2009 when I met Soma, and that was in Estonia. He was offering workshops and courses, and I started studying. And but there was quite a pause between the different workshops at the time, and there was no yoga levels or nothing as elaborate offered at the time. There was no Somananda Tantra School yet. We started it together a couple of years later. But so I was kind of, putting my big toe into the waters of spirituality. And then it was in 2011 that I went to India first time, or Soma took me there, including visiting Rishikesh as well. And I have some profound memories from that visit and from later visits as well. One of the most spectacular moments for me personally was in 2016. We were there with a group of people. We were doing a Trika meditation retreat, and the retreat had finished already. There's, by the way, this crazy story with the monkey, Soma, in the Trika retreat. You can share it afterwards. But anyhow, the group had left, and me, Soma, a couple other people, we stayed longer, like a month more in Rishikesh, just to be in the place to do our personal retreat. And I enjoyed a lot just walking on my own in Rishikesh, in the holy part next to the Ganga. There is all the ashrams and the wonderful, wonderful places. And one day I found a really, really incredible little cafe, which was right next to the Ganges River, overlooking the river. And it had 2 floors. I went to one of the upper floors there, and the Ganga was right over there, and all the river rafting boats were going by. It's a huge river. And I was sitting there, and I was ordering some masala chai, this Indian masala chai, like a whole pot. I can drink liters and liters of that every day if I'm in India. And I had a book with me, and the book was Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, one of the basis texts of yoga. And I started reading it, and I was sitting there in this cafe. It was kind of a simple place, nothing fancy, nothing, Western standard or anything. Simple, very authentic, but extremely cozy and wonderful. And I was sipping chai and reading Yoga Sutras and highlighting important words and sentences in there, and before I know it, a couple of hours had passed and the sun was setting over the Ganga River, and I'm getting tears in my eyes just talking about that moment, because that was one of the kind of wow moments where I realized that this kind of peace that I was having at that moment in that place was incredible. That was like a spiritual peace inside of me, where I realized that that's what I'm supposed to do. Read spiritual literature, think about spiritual topics, be in a spiritual place, and just absorb this abundant energy of spirituality into me through the chai and through the air and through the Ganges and through the Indian waiter who came bothering me every 5 minutes and things like that. So it was really, really incredible, like one of the epiphanies, or like a spiritual awakening moment for me. That was just something absolutely incredible. Rishikesh is filled with these kinds of gems of places. Even if you've been there a lot, You will hear from other people, like often when we are there with groups, that people just go and they find some really incredible places. Along the banks of Ganges, it's kind of narrow streets and little, I don't know, alleys going left and right, and people find incredible like shops or cafes or I don't know, like just wonderful places, and then they come and tell you, hey, have you been to that place? No, I haven't heard of it. Oh, you should really go. And like this you are like exploring more and more and more. Another profound experience that I had, well, really with a lot of energy and spiritual vibe, was in one of the bookshops in Rishikesh. One of the things that you find over there are there's lots of bookshops, and this was one particular bookshop I was going in, and again you need to like throw out of your head any kind of, you know, Western standard bookshop. You go in and here is our top 10 sellers and here are all the clean shelves or something like that. It was a bookshop which was basically packed with book, one on top of the other, and like piles of books. You could barely move around in between the shelves, and you go there and you feel like you are in a treasure place or something. And I was in that shop and just taking books of yoga, tantra, spirituality, like everything, Ayurveda, everything they have there. And I went to the shopkeeper, who was kind of an older guy, like really skinny. It looked like he's 100 years old, and like he's been in that shop all his life or something like that. So he was sitting behind the counter. He was very small Indian guy. I could barely see his head like popping out behind the piles of books. And I was like, okay, excuse me, you know, do you have Shiva Samhita? And he said, yes, I have. And he stood up, he goes around, he goes into one of the shelves, he digs, he lifts like a packs of books away, he digs into the back of the shelf, he pulls out Shiva Samhita and says, here you go. And I'm looking like, you knew where that was? It's like 100,000 books in that little shop, and he could just go directly to whatever you were asking. Other people were visiting as well, and they had the same experience. You go and you ask them book on Ayurveda, and he just goes and he digs for a few minutes, and here you go. And then he digs for it for a few minutes, and here you go. And this kind of feeling of magic, authenticity, this feeling that you go into some little shop or a little bookstore or a little something, and you can find these spiritual gems over there, and there are people who are kind of like guiding you along the way in their natural, just authentic way. That was another time where I had just a wow experience, that I felt like Shiva himself was handing me the Shiva Samhita for me to read and for my spiritual evolution. So that was a highlight, definitely.
In Rishikesh, you definitely get this feeling, which I'm sure many of you have had at least at some point in your life, that you feel that there are no coincidences, that you meet people, sometimes a Westerner, a tourist, someone, maybe sometimes a guru or some person on the street who is giving you some information, and one thing leads to another, and before you know it, by the end of the day, you're sitting in an ashram somewhere meditating or meeting as a great guru or interacting with something quite amazing. Many times in Rishikesh, for example, another experience that you will have if you spend some time there is that you will have different dreams. You can be visited in your dreams by spiritual yogis. I've had quite a few times such experiences. I remember at some point when I was reading a lot of the day, every day for some, 6 months already, I was reading the books of Swami Shivananda. And yes, you guessed it, one time he appeared for me in a dream, and he actually was talking to me and giving me 3 techniques that he said I should be practicing right now. It would be helpful. And when I woke up, I started practicing them, and I actually got some very good results. And those kind of things can happen when you're in Rishikesh. The energy in that area is powerful also on the astral level, not just physically, energetically, but astrally and mentally. And you can be guided in very fascinating ways. I personally have met in Rishikesh quite a few people of high caliber, enlightened people, I've also found in Rishikesh something that we're planning to show people for the yoga teacher training course. I'm planning to show people some very hidden gems in Rishikesh. For example, I found a cave, which is a very small cave, but this cave not far from the Ganges in a specific location upstream, where actually it is very well known a yogi have reached enlightenment in that cave and practiced for 40 years in that cave. Once I found that place, I was at the time doing a lot of meditation myself every day for hours, because it was my special tapas at the time, special practice. And I would go to that cave every day. After I finished my own practice, I would take a walk, get to that cave, sit and meditate for half an hour, 1 hour, as long as I could, because there's always other people wanting to come in, and it's quite a small cave. But I would sit and meditate. And I can tell you, when you sit in that cave and you meditate, your meditation is 10 times more powerful than usual. It's very, very intense, very powerful experience. So definitely fascinating things to find there. Also, there's an area in Rishikesh where you can find where great yogis did their own spiritual practice that led to enlightenment. Like there's what they call the Shivananda Kutir. This is a special hut. It's like a big room type of thing, where Swami Shivananda was sitting for 10 years there, 12 years, if I remember correctly. He was eating very little, like just a few chapatis per day, and he was sitting and meditating and practicing a lot of hours until he reached enlightenment in that place. I took Liisa to that place. We were sitting, we were meditating there. Very powerful. There's many hidden gems in Rishikesh, really. A lot of wonderful things, including some amazing hikes along the jungle over there, which can be very fascinating. At nighttime, for example, not recommended to walk around in the jungle, because you can find elephants. These are wild elephants that sometimes they come in the evening. There's a certain area where they go down to the Ganges to drink the water, not alcohol. They're going to drink, and it's quite amazing to meet those elephants. But I know people who encountered them in the night, and it was quite fascinating indeed. So there's a lot of these experiences you can have. I remember, especially when I was doing at one point in 2004 or 5, for about a year, I was there, and I was doing an incredibly strong practice at the time. I was committing to many hours per day of practice, and I was starting to have some experiences of opening some of the higher chakras very powerfully. And it's amazing, because then one day, walking down the street, you just see one of the beggars suddenly stood up and came to me, and he looked quite strange and started shouting all kinds of things. And I could see, because the third eye, Sahasrara, the crown chakra, are more open at the time because of a very intense practice I was doing. And it's as if he was, in his funny, weird way, he was passing some information for me on a very subtle level. And then after that, I've had quite a powerful experience of jumping forwards in my spiritual evolution. So it's crazy how you may find very strange characters along the way. Not every experience is, a kind of lovey-dovey experience, but it is still very educational, and you can really progress a lot, even without realizing what happens and because of what reason. So yeah, that's just a couple of other things I had there. Liisa, what else from you?
I was just thinking about this story with the monkey. Yeah, so this is a story which is kind of showing these gems of surprises that happens in Rishikesh. It is a town, it is a city which is in the foot of the Himalayas, right? The Himalaya mountains are starting from there. It's already quite high up. So we are in between mountains. There is jungle everywhere, a lot of nature. And naturally there are monkeys around, because they live in the mountains there, and they come to town. And especially in early morning hours when the sun is rising, you can see the monkeys crossing the bridge from one side of the river to the other. So they come to town in the morning in the hopes of, obviously, to find food and, intimidate the tourists a little bit or something and have their photos taken. So there was one, I come to the story shortly, but there was one time where I was already out in town very early, and I was next to one of these big bridges, hanging bridges, which are only for pedestrians that are crossing the river. And then from one side, I'm further away from the bridge, and then I see literally 30 monkeys, one after the other, walking across the railing of the bridge to the other side of the river. It's like, you know, they're holding on to it. That was really, really amazing and funny to see. But there was another story that really made us laugh a lot. Some years ago, we were doing the Trika meditation retreat in Rishikesh with a group, and it was day 5 or 6 or something, and we were renting a yoga hall somewhere up on a last floor of a building, and we were all meditating. And all of a sudden, like we hear some noise in the background, like some plastic noise. I mean, like a plastic bag being shuffled around or something. I thought that maybe somebody, I don't know, some of the participants needs to look for something, or I don't know, needs a biscuit or whatever. And I ignored it and continued. And after a while, again, this plastic bag noise and so on. I opened my eyes and I'm like, oh my God. In the back of the hall, behind everybody, was a monkey who had gotten in through a window which wasn't properly closed. And the monkey was eating the bananas of one of the participants who had the bananas in a plastic bag back in the hall. So we were meditating. The monkey had been there like 10 minutes at least, just sitting, peeling and eating bananas. And we look back and everybody started laughing like, oh my goodness. And how do you get the monkey out of there? The only way how we could get him out of there was together with the bag of bananas. That was just a beautiful, funny experience. There is lots of stories with these monkeys over there. There are the two types of monkeys in Rishikesh, and they are kind of used to that they may get food, especially from tourists. We don't recommend feeding them. But there's been a couple of times, there's one type of monkey who is like very slim, but when they stand up in their back legs, they are really tall. It's a little bit like an alien, you know, this kind of with a big head and very, very slim body like this. And one time together we were walking on the street, and then we had some food, some naan or something in our hand, like eating it. And then we see the monkey spotted us. We have food in our hand. He was rising up to his back legs because they have learned that tourists, the ones who are not very familiar with the flora and fauna in Rishikesh, they get a bit scared and then they drop their food. So they know that all they need to do is like stand up and take like 1 or 2 steps towards you, and already food is flying in their direction basically. So this monkey did the same. It started coming, and I had some food in my hand, I think, and I was like, take it. You know, like, okay, I won't fight you, take my naan, right? He grabs the naan and goes to the side of the road and just eats it with great pleasure.
The first time I was also a bit worried because I wasn't traveling until then so much, and then going to India was quite a big step for me, but I have now a lot of beautiful pictures and stories to tell and experiences, so I'm very, very happy that I went for personal reasons, but also spiritual reasons. Because I actually, as many of you know already, I'm coming from a Christian background, specifically the Protestant church. And this can be a bit dry, at least in my experience, my childhood and so on. It was a bit of a dry spirituality. And then when I came to Tantra and yoga, and especially going to Rishikesh, then it became really alive. The very fascinating thing for me was in Rishikesh that somehow everywhere you go, you see some spiritual things, or you see some statues, or you see people praying or doing pujas. And it's a environment that is very saturated with the thought of God or spirituality or practice, meditation, yoga, and all these things. And it's quite fulfilling, so to speak. It's very motivating, like it's feeding you with this motivation, like, oh yeah, I want to read more books, I want to do more yoga, I want to meditate more. I actually went together with a few others with a motorcycle to find a certain cave, because the place we were having our yoga retreat, the owner, he was recommending some places to go, and there was one specific cave of a rishi, of a great yogi from the past, from a long time ago, that he recommended to go and visit and meditate in. And then we made a journey with the motorcycle, like driving for 1 hour or so to go to this meditation cave. And actually it was quite mysterious to find. I really took me quite a while to find this cave, but then eventually we made it, and then we got in and meditated. And as Soma described earlier, I also had this phenomenon that, like, you sit in and you close your eyes and wow, you're meditating, like your head is buzzing, and somehow the chakras are immediately energized and activated, and you feel very elevated, very high, very quickly. And this is very beautiful because especially at that time I was also still a beginner in yoga and tantra, and then immediately you get a real experience. It's not just like, yeah, if you sit and meditate for 10 years and maybe you will feel something. But then sitting in this place where a great master has been meditating for a long time and has reached high states of consciousness, and somehow this energy infusing the space was infusing the stones somehow, very mystically, and then you sit inside even thousands of years later, and then you close your eyes, and without asking any questions, you immediately feel, wow, okay, this is something special. Even if you had doubts, even if you felt like, oh, so far my practice wasn't working well, or my meditations were not good, but I had this very clear experience. Okay, this is a real thing. I mean, this for sure. I don't know this man who has been meditating there so long ago. Haven't heard of him before, but then I felt definitely this man, this master has actually reached some high states, and I can feel it, and I can actually benefit from it. So this was a really powerful meditation. I actually was sitting for quite a while there together with the others, and eventually the other monks there who meditate there regularly, they kind of moved us out because also other people wanted to join in, and it's a small cave, so we had to leave. Actually, we didn't want to, but we had to leave at some point. So this was just one of the experiences. And yeah, so in Rishikesh, it's quite a heart fulfilling space, so to speak, where you really get infused with this history of yoga. It's really alive still. And I can also tell you a similar story like Liisa said about the books, because Soma was recommending a lot of books at that time when we had the course, and then me and some other guys, we made a list, long list of books that we need to get, and then we went to one of the bookshops, and then we had a huge pile of books. I actually had a lot of overweight when I flew back to Germany, all sorts of books there, because they are actually cheap. If I would buy them in Germany, then it would be much more expensive. So then I got to study it and practice and really benefit from this spiritual vibe there. It's very, very fulfilling, especially for me, coming from a more dry background and seeing it so alive, practiced every single day there. This was very beautiful for me to see. Additionally, there's many stories to tell. Obviously, when you go to India, there's lots of stuff happening, and it's quite funny, some of the things, and beautiful to remember. And like Liisa was telling the story with the monkeys and so on. But definitely for me, what was most important at that time was this spiritual vibe, this spiritual energy. I don't know how to describe it better, but somehow it's as if you have been walking through the desert, you try to find some spiritual enthusiasm, and then you go to a place and suddenly, wow, you get infused with this energy.
Maybe, Sigi, the best way how to describe it would be that in Rishikesh, spirituality is not something that you do, but something that you are, something that you become over there. Because every aspect of life is infused with this atmosphere and this energy. The local people talk about Shiva and divinity and these things all the time, It's very refreshing, very, very different compared to West.
Yes, I had this experience indeed, yes. This type of a feeling only in two places so far, where I've been in Jerusalem and in Rishikesh. So that is quite powerful. And definitely it is, for those people over there, it's very normal to talk about the divine, to talk about spiritual practice and evolution and all these things. And if I would talk about the same things in my village, and people would think like, oh, this guy's a bit crazy or something. He has been doing too much of these meditations.
And because of this difference and because of this absolutely powerful spiritual undertone everywhere and this powerful support, that is also the reason why we are doing this year, luckily again, after COVID is over and everything, we have a chance again to be doing retreats in India, and we are returning back to Rishikesh for the Tantra Yoga teacher training course and Tantra Yoga level 1 as well. Soma, maybe you could speak a little bit about those things. What does it mean to be on a spiritual retreat, and what does it mean to do it in a place like Rishikesh?
Wonderful topics to discuss, because to be on a spiritual retreat is considered to be a fundamental concept in any spiritual path, especially in yoga and in Tantra. Especially coming from the Tibetan tradition, they speak about how retreat is what makes your spiritual evolution move forwards a lot faster. And in fact, what's really recommended is to do retreats periodically. A retreat doesn't have to be too long. A retreat can be even just a weekend. It can be a week or 2 weeks, depending on how much time you have. But of course, the longer to retreat, the more profound the effects. But more than that, I can tell you that the journey for me in India was not only evolving spiritually, but also learning to teach yoga and Tantra. That was the origin for me where I started going in that direction. Because first, when I looked for spirituality, I was looking for my own evolution. I wanted to study, to develop. That was important for me. However, pretty quickly, I realized that to really evolve powerfully spiritually, it helps tremendously if you learn to teach the teachings of spirituality. Many of you probably heard of this funny little term that they use in the West a lot, those who cannot do teach. And that's kind of funny. And it always is used derogatorily to make people think like it's silly to try and teach. But I can tell you from my experience that in yoga, in Tantra, it's exactly the opposite. When you start teaching, because there's a special process called empowerment that is happening in teaching. I received the empowerment from my gurus. And when I started teaching, because of the empowerment, you actually start noticing that you get a lot more grace. Much, much more compared to a person who's just sitting and doing yoga in their own private home from time to time. When you teach, it's as if you're suddenly becoming like a soldier of God in a way. So definitely, I would say that what for me, India did, it transformed me. It transformed me from a seeker to a teacher. Not only seeking spirituality for me, but making sure that I become a conduit of spiritual knowledge to others. And there's something amazing with that, because when you start becoming a yoga teacher, you learn to give. And I know it sounds simple. Yeah, right, what do you give? But actually you do. You learn how to give, and you're becoming a channel for divine energy to flow through you. And if you ask any one of our students, some of them in this group right now, who have become yoga teachers with us, or even meditation teachers with us, they all will tell you that the minute they started teaching, it's as if suddenly they have some kind of invisible power that is channeling through them. And then when they stand in front of students, they don't know how, knowledge comes, information comes, support comes, extra energy comes, and you feel like you become brilliant in some ways. You become emanating. You become a focal point, a channel for the divine, and it's a very powerful thing to develop. That's why in the yogic tradition, it is known when you start teaching and offering and giving spirituality to others, your personal evolution accelerates 100-fold. If you can do one thing in your life, become a yoga teacher. This is an incredible step forwards for you. And if you're wondering, for years now, I've tried and I've done yoga and I've done meditation and I've done many things, and somehow I don't feel that I got much progress. The solution is simple. Start giving. Stop thinking about what's happening with me. When am I going to get enlightened? When do I get some, spiritual results? Why don't I get what I want? You don't get what you want because you just take. Stop taking and start giving. And to become a yoga teacher is the ultimate way to offer and to give and to share spiritual knowledge, spiritual energy, initiations, everything comes. And then you'll see what, the more you pump out, the more you give, the more you develop yourself spiritually. So that's why definitely highly recommended to become a yoga teacher. For me, when I first started when I was initiated as a yoga teacher by my guru back in the year 2000, I know that from that second, everything changed for me. I remember at that time, the guru that I've had was initiating me to become a yoga teacher. And then he was at the end of it telling me, okay, so now you can start teaching. However, I have to go. He had to go somewhere for some visa run or whatever he was doing. And he said, I don't have anybody else left with the group, so I want you to give a few lectures. I was like, whoa, okay, you made me a yoga teacher, but I haven't yet learned any lectures, I haven't studied anything yet. And he said, it will be fine. Because he was doing some meditations with me and he said, I'm connected to you now. You'll have support. I said, great support. You're not even here. How am I going to do this? So he said, it'll be fine. So it was time for me to give a lecture for the first time in my life in front of a group of like 50 people or something. And I had just a little notebook where I wrote 5-6 things about the lecture because I listened to that lecture twice before or something. So I didn't have much information. And yet I remember I was doing my consecration and then I started giving the lecture, and it was the most incredible experience that I've had because I opened my mouth and the information started coming out. The lecture was flowing. And I remember it was so fascinating because there was a part of my brain that was observing the process saying, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. That's interesting information. And it's like the knowledge comes and I'm like, like a passenger in the back seat, just observing what's going on and so on. And then when the lecture was finished, it was time to ask people if you have any questions, ask, and many people had questions. That was when the second shock came to me because they were asking questions and I knew for a fact that I had no clue what to answer because I didn't know. I was just a beginner. And yet my mouth was open and the answers came and they were on the money, perfect answers, very logical, everything. And I was listening, wow, that was a good answer. I don't even know where it came from. And that's how it worked. Becoming a yoga teacher through a lineage, when you have this kind of support and the energy flows through you, it's a magical experience. And it really transforms you. After some years of being a teacher, you start getting used to the fact that energy flows, knowledge flows through you, and you are not surprised anymore that you are able to answer and elucidate and clarify and get people inspired. And every time you do that, no matter how, I've been doing this now for 25 years almost, and I can tell you, even today, still when this happens, I still ask myself, how is this happening? What did I do to deserve this grace? What did I do to be able to do so much for other people and to share and to give? This is the spiritual path of being a yoga teacher. So I'm telling you, you want something to change in your life, start changing things in your life. And one of the most amazing things you can do is become a yoga teacher. So that was my little input about the crazy experiences that I've had. And by the way, those experiences of lecturing and all that I just told you happened in Rishikesh. And I was teaching there a group of 50 people, and it was quite the journey. It was very surprising and very educational for me because I learned new things in those lectures. For me, somehow, it just moved through, and it was very fascinating to see. So really, being a yoga teacher, that's the way to go.
I wanted to go back to showing you a couple of more pictures from the atmosphere and energy in Rishikesh. This is one of the holy areas in Rishikesh. This is one of the bridges. This is how the river Ganges looks like coming from the mountains. It's very beautiful and clean over there. Once the river goes through India and reaches to Calcutta, where it goes into the Indian Ocean, the river is different. But over there in Rishikesh, it's absolutely amazing. It's looking like this here. This is one of the bridges and temples everywhere. These houses you see in the background are temples that you can visit and like go up in the tower, ring a bell every time you reach to the new level. It is kind of imitating the spiritual evolution of going up in the chakras. Everywhere you go, you find all sorts of spiritual statues. This is a scene from the famous Bhagavad Gita. a whole thing going on there. Here is a Shiva statues in many places. Here is one of the many ashrams. I don't know, there's like dozens and dozens of different ashrams in Rishikesh as well, which are doing yoga classes and different teachings. Some, and then next to Ganga, some ghats, or these stairs which are leading, people are coming in the morning to bathe in the holy river or make offerings. This is a really wonderful one in Rishikesh, which you can visit and meditate. There are fire pujas that are taking place next to it, like overlooking the Ganges River and with the Shiva over there. These are the higher mountains of the Himalayas. Here you can see them even better over here. They say that with a good weather, like a super clear weather, this is already good weather, but even more clear weather, you can see the Everest from that place. We didn't see it that day, but you see those super high ones in the back there was still quite spectacular. This place here is one of the pictures of one of the venue where we are going to have the yoga retreat. And we have some cabins there, some stone houses as well, some cabins, and then that's the scenery. Mountains, green, the jungle, nature. Here is another one, some rice fields as well. This is a neighbor's house over there, like a farmer lives there, and that's their rice field here. One of the wonderful things that we will do with the group as well on one of the days, we're gonna go and to the Ganga and make a holy prayer. This is like an offering to the Ganges River, where you can say a prayer, you do some offering like flowers and incense, and you make your prayer and you send it down the river. People are doing that a lot over there because Ganga has a very spiritual meaning, and it's wonderful to do these things. This is the Shiva statue next to Ganga. This is an actual statue right there to meditate with and where the pujas are taking place. So there is simply a lot of amazing experiences to have. The things that Soma was saying about spiritual retreats or taking a retreat, I personally think that for any individual, even if you are not specifically planning to make yoga your whole life or to be in this environment or to be practicing all your life, but at least once in your life to take a serious retreat or a kind of like a pilgrimage of sorts, that would be just extremely beneficial, and the chances are that it is going to benefit your life in absolutely unforeseeable ways, like it did for me, like it did for Soma, like it did for Siegbert and others who have been to India and to Rishikesh in particular. So this is the inspiration and kind of more of a personal note that we wanted to share today. Thank you all very much. And take care, and we'll be in touch.